What was that, what's his name? Oh, yeah, Dickens. What did he say? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I'm sure you know the saying. That Dickens guy, man, he would have made a hell of a wannabe chaser. January 6, 2008 was that exactly. The best of times, the worst of times. Depends on who you were. You could have been Spike. You could have been Nate. What's that? Who's Nate? Oh, him. He's my sidekick. Anybody that's anybody has one. And mine, Nate that is, had plenty of the best of times that January day. He was able to satiate his thirst for the Obama Hope and Change Kool-Aid. That's what got him in a Subaru down Manchester way from way up north in Burlington, Vermont. That's what made him think that sleeping in his car on a January night in Manchester, New Hampshire was a good idea. Until you've had that thirst, you can't imagine how delicious it is to quench it. Especially when it was all going down at the Palace Theater. What a magic place that is. The best of times? You bet your ass. The worst of times? John Edwards, Franco-American Hall, later that same morning. No two ways about it. The worst of times in the first layer of hell. I should know. I was there. You know, it wasn't so visible on YouTube, but Edwards was just an awful man, preying on the most unfortunate souls, feasting on their wounds. A snake oil salesman who knows that snake oil only sells when the rube is dying, and he'll do anything to not stare down that abyss. Snake oil sure beats the alternative. Of course, I didn't know that on the morning of January 6, 2008. I was just enjoying my free coffee at the Current coffee shop right next to the Palace Theater in downtown Manchester. Along with free coffee, Current was supplying computers with internet you could use while injecting your body with legal speed, because that's what caffeine is, really. What's that? What's Current? Oh, Current was the network owned by Al Gore, and they had a coffee shop right next to the Palace Theater primary week. Jesus, if Gore gave free coffee and internet in 2000, he might have been president. So what I was doing was looking for something to do that the great white might have been interested in doing too. I was cruising the internet when I saw a listing that I thought might not be a clusterfuck. Little did I know. All it said was a John Edwards event was starting in about 15 minutes at the Franco-American Center, just a few blocks from Current. What the hell, I thought. 2 days before primary day, time for political junkie kind of fun. You know, to this day, I can't describe it. And if I can't describe it, how can I write it? First off, what was this event anyway? Other than another audition? No, strike that. What it really was a job interview, and what we were was the boss, deciding who we were going to hire. Then there was the line. God, the line. Huge. And leading into a real kind of claustrophobic space. That's the only way I can describe it. And people were kind of baffled, wondering if we'd get in, wondering what time the Pats were playing. You know, we'll listen to Edwards, and God damn it, I hope we love him was the general feeling. I mean, there was some rah-rah types, but not a whole bunch had the zeal other candidates let's have. Or maybe the real Edwards fans got the good seats, and the non-committed had to battle with the out-of-state voters. And the losers had to stand, jostle with the media, which was a gigantic pain in my you-know-what. If one more boom mic, or whatever the fuck you call it, were to stick me up the ass, I was going to fucking lose it. Even the celebrity watching wasn't sexy enough to offset the Holocaust march to oblivion. Don't get me wrong, there was some good second-tier celebrity viewing. David Broder was there. The fucking professor. He wrote the book, The Party's Over, that led directly to me being a primary tourist, to being here in this godforsaken place, in this Franco-American Center or hall or whatever. Well, maybe not directly. It was required reading in a course I took way back in a different century, my freshman year, or was it sophomore year? Broder died not too long after that day in 2008 from diabetes. Can you believe that? I always thought the whole thing took a big chunk out of his hide. I don't know, he looked pretty bad going in. Worse coming out, though. Most of us did. I could hear, off in the distance, John Edwards come in with Elizabeth. A real piece of work that slime was, I'll tell you. He was fucking over Elizabeth just like he fucked over all of us. The losers, the downtrodden, the very people he claimed to be fighting for. Those were the ones he hoped were going to seek him as a savior, just like the tragic figures he put on stage with him. Thank you, John Edwards. Thank you for inviting us here, getting us these great seats, letting us tell our story, treating us like the guest of honor when actually it was you all along, wasn't it? You staged your own coronation. Well, tried to is more like it. Came up a little short, as it turned out. So Elizabeth did the heartfelt intros. Jesus, what slime Edwards is. Political posturing while his wife's dying, while he's, Jesus, what an insect, fucking the one that'll inflate his ego the most. Will film it all for posterity. And Elizabeth is dying for him. And America is dying, and he thinks he can save us, or so he says. Things about Edwards was that he was a good litigator, always, but sometimes he was a good actor. And he was just off that day. And who wouldn't be? The advanced team of his kind of bid it on this one. They figured they'd underestimate the crowd, then look great when it's a little elevated, you know? But instead you got people, undecided people, herded in like the sheep the advanced team figured, well, hoped they were, for the slaughter. Funny, it don't look that way on YouTube. I found it right before the stroke. Uploaded by John Edwards, whoever he is. Probably some Real Hunter allies work. Perfect. Elizabeth looked extra frumpy. John looked extra sexy if you weren't on the lookout for RFK wannabes. Fucking perfect. To tell the truth, it looked like John and Elizabeth had a fight, if you're looking for it. It's painful to remember that morning now. He attempted to tug at heartstrings, but in a twisted, sadistic, voyeur kind of way. The poor Sarkeesian family. The first part of the event was them telling their tale of woe. They just lost their daughter, and I remember what it was like to lose a sister. Remember that my mother never really recovered, and I didn't want to look as they lionized their manipulator with their accord, a rattle with guilt accord. And why were they there? So John Edwards gets to be president? Why? He had reasons, rational reasons that could appear to be passionate reasons. They made sense. If only I could believe it. If only I could believe him. Snake oil, and there was more of it. It's not time yet? Moving slow today for some reason. Yeah, where was I? Oh, yeah, the snake oil to desperate rubes. Oh, yeah, there was more. I wish there wasn't, but there's plenty. And Real's buddy, or whoever, arranged to film these shenanigans, knew just when to cut to the concerned citizens, when to cut to the grieving family, when to share their ride, their day in the sun. Then poor James Lowe was born with a disease where he couldn't talk and had a cure, but he had no insurance. So his simple right to speak was taken from him, basically because he couldn't afford it. So John Edwards somehow paid for his operation, I think. I can't say because, well, now that he can talk, John Edwards figures, hell, let him tell his story. But he can talk like I can walk. It's not walking if you need a special cane and every step of the way to the toilet you're afraid you'll either fall on your ass or pee your pants because no one else in this godforsaken place. Staff is God knows where. That ain't walking. And what James Lowe was doing wasn't talking. Although it spoke volumes about John Edwards. You see, John Edwards thinks he can be a little God or maybe God himself. He thinks because he says it, it's so. He's more than a crusader. He's the shit, you know? Fucking delusional douchebag. I did notice one guy in back of the podium. He had a camera, I thought. No, he's taking notes. Who is that guy? Little did I know it was going to be my first political tourism sidekick. Fucking Nate. Where he was, he didn't have to worry about a boom mic up his ass. In his own way, he was doing it all, Nate style. And this morning, all he knew was he had a day off way the hell up north in Burlington. It was just past closing time in Burlington, and he heard about Obama coming to Manchester, and he figured, what the hell? I have pretty reliable wheels. Time for a road trip. A little past sunrise, he slept in his car just north of Manchester and came into the higher possibility that was the '08 version of Obama. Hope. We all wanted that. And change. Hopefully for the better. It was a pretty heady time. Definitely the best of times was right around the corner. I miss it. Little did I know that the change for me was going to not be able to walk and living in a glorified loony bin. So anyway, after this life in paradise that everyone imagines after a small sip of the Obama Kool-Aid, he heard of this Edwards thing. And after that, he headed back to current, and history began. For us. And what better an iconic relationship than buddy sidekick, one young guy, one older guy? I just had to get used to being the older guy, that's all. Scene 1. Back at Clusterfuck City, and Spike pulls another boom from his ass. This one operated by Real Hunter. Doesn't mean anything that she was already pregnant with Edward's kid. This is Hollywood. Meanwhile, Nate, still camera in tow, is heading out. If we start earlier than that, we'd have to include some of the ugliness of the event itself, and that's so un-Hollywood. What's that? Start with Obama and Nate at the palace? Interesting. But this is the Nate and Spike story, and they started during the worst of times, even though they didn't know each other then. So anyway, back at scene 1, Nate and Spike have the same thought at the same time. Coffee. And what says coffee more than Al Gore? A very convenient truth. Yada yada. Young guy looking for Obama headquarters. Old guy's been there before. Bada? Young guy has a button that old guy likes. Bing. I smoke pot and I vote. You know, if you don't mind the company, it's easier for me to tell you if we ride there. It's a kick-ass walk, but it's a short drive. Yeah, let's go. I was in the car before I pointed to his button and said, "You got any?" "I wish." "Well," I said as I pulled out a bag of sweet-smelling skunk weed, "I guess we'll have to smoke this." That was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Right in front of the Palace Theater in Manchester. That was a good sign. The Palace was kind of like, well, maybe not the Mecca, but a Mecca for the political junkie. For me, it already had ghosts of the living, Al Franken, Howard Dean, Martin Sheen, and one dead, R.I.P. Peter Jennings. It was 2004, January 26th. Howard Dean was in town. I had never seen Howard Dean, and tomorrow was the primary. No time like the present, they say, but I prefer yesterday, maybe tomorrow. All I know is today sucks. Yesterday was pretty sweet, January 26th, 2004, if you're using the Wayback Machine. Right where Nate left his car, the Palace. Manchester, the center of the political universe every 4 years. And the Palace was kind of, what would you call it, the classical deco capital of Manchester. A real beauty. One of those places you love even before you know the place. The beauty starting with his marquee. First time I saw it, I just peeked through the window, saw the splendor of it all. Even with the lights out, the doors locked. It was saying, come back some other time. And I knew it would be someday. And I was still waiting to get in then. Eyes everywhere, waiting in the lobby, wondering if I can get past the alcove into the theater itself, if I will even be able to see Howard Dean at all. It's more than just a speck way up there. But I'm loving it, still soaking in the atmosphere. A hell of a lot better than the undisclosed location, a lot better than work. Is there a single looking for a seat? That was my cue. Me. Once was enough. Follow me. Since she was a pretty young woman, it was a natural enough instinct. The aisle was crowded, so I got a little too close to people's toes. Sorry, I said. And there was Al Franken, the me-decade guy. Nobody knew, well, I didn't know, he'd be running for the Senate in 2 years. He was trying to start Air America then. Remember? Well, he was. And I stepped on his toe. I'll see you on the radio, I said to him. Oh, New Hampshire, primary time. Time to hobnob with the rich and famous, past and future. It's amazing how elusive the present could be. The one single seat was in the front row, front and center. Before too long, the person millions knew as President Josiah Bartlett was sitting right in front of me. He was known by most of the rest of us as Martin Sheen. Just to show you how much I was living in the past, I didn't think of him as West Wing. I thought of him as Apocalypse Now, and the fucking country was going down the river. But they were going down the river right in front of me. It was kind of surreal. All for Howard Dean. By all rights, he shouldn't be a rock star, but he was. I was so close to him I could see his shoes, could see they needed a shine. I wondered if the next president would need a shine. I mean, I agreed with everything he said. That was where the party should be. Hell, that's where the country should be. But was he the man to lead us there? All of us. Not just the Birkenstock kids that believe him so much they'll go anywhere, do anything for him, but us all. Talk about surreal. Was it somebody in the audience gave Dr. Dean a stethoscope and he fucking wore it right in front of my eyes? But do we want a doctor? No one wants to take their medicine. No one wants a needle up their ass. They just want to bitch if the prognosis isn't satisfactory. We'll never elect our doctor. Oh, Doc, I didn't mean anything by that. I'm sorry. I think you'd make a great president, but all I mean to say is you'll never be president, and neither will Howard Dean. What's that? Oh, you're not a doctor, technically. Mind if I call you sir? No, where was I? Just stethoscope, needle up your ass. Oh, yeah, elect our doctor. Thank you. Well, eventually, they got to the question and answer part, and that's when it started to get a little interesting. Dicey, even. You know, I can't even remember the question this LaRouche guy asked, but I'll never forget the vial. And this guy was up in the balcony, but I'll never forget the venom in this guy's voice, or the fact that he wouldn't let go. And the shit he was running out about was something about Dean going easy on Dick Cheney. And right there, you knew the guy was fucking crazy. I mean, it might have been shooting fish in a barrel, but Dean was never one to mince words about the tyranny of Dick Cheney. Oh, and this guy, this crazy guy, was babbling some shit about John Kerry being the shit of all shits. You know what I'm saying? Like king shit. Made me think it was some kind of ghost of Nixon dirty tricks, you know? And right then and there, Dean did something, made me think, like I wasn't already, this guy will never be president. He called, security. I can see it like it was yesterday, right on his face. Scared? Call a cop. And those people you'd call a cop on, that's your fucking potential base. You need to expand it. Birkenstock wearers, shit, they're great for legwork work, but you need the have-nots in your corner, and you don't get them by calling the cops on them. Don't get me wrong. I would have called the cops too, but I'm not running for president. So security shows up in about 15 seconds. And the guy still fought just to stand his ground, and I don't mean the Florida way. He wanted to yell over Dean and other questionnaires. He wanted to cry fire in a crowded theater. Not literally, not legally, but really, actually. And the event was falling out of Dean's control. Seems to me that every question from the audience was another person hopping up to harangue Dean and lionize Kerry. Real fucking weird. At least that's how I remember it. There was a commotion in back of me. I think the first guy got away. There were 3 guys on him, and he got away. But I couldn't really see it. Damn front row seat. So I was turning around to get a better view, and I saw a man backstage peek behind the curtain. And that was Peter Jennings. Alive back then, and right in front of my eyes. I wonder if he ever saw such a sight in his life. Kind of like the ship of state was sinking, and no one was in charge. What I found out later was that Al Franken tackled the guy. Al Franken, more than 10 years after his decade. I wondered, did I piss him off just enough by stepping on his toe? What I found out even later was I got on TV that day. I'm not even sure what network. I think the caption was something like, concerned New Hampshire voter. Except for the New Hampshire part, they got it right. What a ride. The best of times. Of course, for Dean, it was a disaster. The worst of times, maybe. And Dean was my guy, kind of, sort of. But for a political tourist, it was heaven. The kind of day you wish you could bottle and take out on real shitty days. Like every fucking day in this hellhole. Time? Already? Back to the worst of times.